Hey buddies, welcome to AmassGames. My name is Simon. Today I bring out a setup, play and review the game The Cousins War. This is by David J. Mortimer and brought to you by Surprise Dare Games Limited. So this is an English, I guess, kind of civil war game. It's an English company as well, I think an even English designer, I'd probably highly imagine so. And it's basically the War of the Roses. Now they may have play tested it and thought actually the name War of the Roses didn't work so well. There's a whole history if you want to pause this. This is being filmed at 4K, so by all means, want to read more into the detail. It's set up north, and the aim of the game in this asymmetrical game, it can take 30 minutes, it can take 5 minutes, it can take a bit longer actually. I actually find the more you play it, the more you're thinking about your turn. There's a couple of promos here for some other games which we won't be using to use. Although if you do want to watch other videos, I have made a video, I believe, for Guilds of London, and I've also played Synodonia as well. The number of cards in the game, you are going to have this player reference sheet. There's only one for some reason in the game, and there are two rule books because there's one minor mistake, which you hardly notice, but they've got the die pips missing over here. So they thought, you know what, we'll re-release this and chuck these out. Now, there is a second edition to this game as well. So what do you need to do? Well, let's start setting up the game. You are going to have various factions in play. You're either going to be playing as red or white. Maybe it depends on where you're from in the country, etc. So if you happen to be from Yorkshire, and I do actually have ancestry up that way, then you are going to be white. If you wish to be, or you happen to come from Lancashire, then you're going to be red. That is Lancaster. So you're going to orientate this board maybe slightly differently, but I'm going to have it orientated towards myself in this instance and take your respective cubes. So there we go. And what you're going to be doing is you are going to also have the French, which represent blue. Just whilst I'm still sorting this out, please ensure you hit the like button, hit that share and subscribe. That's in YouTube as well as wherever else you're watching this as well. Please do comment them on YouTube because everyone else then sees it from that source material. We're starting on round one. Like I said, it's a maximum of a 5-round game. Otherwise, if you happen to be controlling the most regions after any particular given round, then you would be the winner. In this instance, let's say that red has managed to maintain that majority after round one, then the game ends immediately. So you need to constantly be aware of that in this kind of area control game with some dice. And if you haven't already noticed, I do dice distancing videos to see how far dice roll. I've made over 50. And it seems to be popular enough, and people do seem to want more of them. So if you want to see how far that rolls, check out the playlist for this. This is in the How to Setup, Play and Review playlist, as well as my 2-player playlist and various others. So you have various different cards. We're going to first chuck out 6 each. So let's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The opponent, we're not going to play an opponent's hand, but let's say we've got 6 cards as well. You're going to look through your cards, and then you're going to pass a card to your opponent. The reason being is they might want to use that card or maybe be forced to use it. Let's just not really think about it too much, but let's say that we are playing as, who did I say we were playing as? Playing as Yorkshire, so playing as white. Okay, I played as red last time actually I played. So in this instance, I don't want to be aware of various stuff, because if it's a certain round, it is in round one, then the opponent, in this case Lancaster, gets to play certain stuff as well, which is never usually a good thing. So bearing that in mind, I might want to play a card that doesn't help them. So firstly, I've got to give them a card. So I'm playing as white, so in this instance, let's give them this card because myself as York, I can benefit if they play this card as a card straight down here. So that's what I'm going to do, pass them a card, they're just going to give me a card, let's see what I happen to get. Nothing, let's say, that benefits me straight away. So we need to see who starts. So let's see who starts the round. You need to play one of your battle cards. So I must play that, that's the only one I have. They look through their hand, see if they've actually got any, they do. They've got Ludford Bridge, which happens to be an earlier date. If it's an earlier date, that is the battle that we're going to be playing. So they represent, let's say this area, we represent over here. They're playing as, go remember my colours again, they're playing Lancaster, so they get to place a cube on here immediately. And now they're aiming to control that battle, because at the end of the round, whoever controls the most, then they are going to take control and place their cubes out onto the board. So let's see what I'm doing first. So they're playing a card. Let's say they're going first then. Let's just kind of go random. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't have them there. I've got too many cards. So I've got 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say these are their cards. They're going to play a card actually. So let's just see what they play. Add to the battlefield 1 cube from the supply and 1 from your reserve. All right. So bearing that in mind, everyone starts off, by the way, with 2 each. And let's just say they do this. So add a battlefield for 1 cube from the supply to your reserve. So add to the battlefield 1 cube from the supply and 1 cube from your reserve. So this is the battlefield here, and they can do 1 here as well. Remember, this is the reserve. Sorry, this is the supply, this is the reserve. And now it's my turn. And I could do something similar. Take any cube from any non-battle region. No. Move any 2 cubes from the board to your reserve. Well, I've got nothing on the board presently. Oh, apologies. I just need to do one more thing. I believe everybody also starts off with a cube on the board as well. There we go. Forgot to add those cubes are there initially. So of course this affects what you're going to be having. So let's have a look. If you have the fewest card in the battlefield, I have the fewest card in the battlefield than your opponent. Okay, move them to your side. But there are no blue cubes there. So these are currently not in play, so we can't do anything about that. If your opponent controls most regions, they don't. That's not a region of the battlefield. Take any cube from any non-battle region and put it back into the supply. So I could choose to do this. It doesn't proc for them, so I do this. Let's say I get rid of this cube. So that goes back into the supply. Now it's their turn. They're going to play a card on me, add 1 cube to each region from your reserve. So they've only got 1 card in their reserve, so let's hold off on that card for now. 1 or 2, okay, let's try and get some cards into my supply. Okay, I think we're going to chuck some cards in and do the other options. So what you can do is you can use actual action points. You have 3 on this card, 2 on this one, 1 on here, 2 on here. What I can choose to do is actually place his troops into my reserve. So I'm placing 2 into my reserve. That's my turn done, or obviously the turn of red being Lancaster. And now over here, move 2 cubes from your board to reserve. No. If your opponent controls the most regions, they don't. The blue cubes, so none of these are any good. So I'm probably going to do the same thing. I'm going to play another 2 card. And again, it doesn't help them. So I'm going to bring more cards just for this region as well. 2 things over here. And now it's over to them. And where are those cards gone? Okay, so they, let's say, add 1 or 2 cubes to the north region from reserve. Well, here's your reserve. Chuck them over here. Back to me. Let's say, again, I want to play this. Just to bring 3 more cubes on, ready for a bigger turn next round. They have their final turn, and now it's down to 1 last card each. So say they've taken their final turn, I've taken my final turn, they've got 1 card left each, and it happens to be something like this. We now look to see who's battling over here. Well, currently they're winning this, but the way it works is if I wish to, I can say, okay, they're going to roll 3 dice. I do not see the results. And they tell me, a bit like Perudo, okay, so I might have 2 4s, they might say they've got 2 5s, they might say they've got 2 2s, they could say they've got triples, something like that. And what I'm going to be doing is, what they'll be doing is, if they've got a card spare, which they will do because they've got a spare card left over, they can use action points to change the value of one of these up or down by 1. So they could like increase this one by 1, that one down to a 3, and that one, of course, they won't make it enough of a difference, but it goes down to 4. So what they do is they say, okay, I've got 2 3s. They wouldn't have changed at that point, but excuse me. But then what they do is then they're able to say, okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm saying I've got 2 3s. Do you believe me? And they can choose to believe you or not. If they choose to believe you, then that's fine. You then have to prove it. So you then have to then play a card out. So you've got 1 card spare. And in this instance, increase up to a 3 and decrease, obviously, this one down to a 3 as well. So yeah, there you go, done it. And the way it works is you lose something off here for not being able to do it. So instead you say, all right, I think you've done it. It's now my turn to try and beat it. This time it's an open roll. And you roll something like this. And again, I have now got to, this is why you want to keep a card back, maybe lots of action points, is switch these, because right now I can get myself trips, so I can get myself 3 5s, which beats it. And the reason why this is important to try and get triples is it's the amount of cubes you're losing, because if you get 3 correct, you're losing more cubes. So 3 basically makes you lose 2 cubes, 2 makes you lose 1, etc. And they keep on fighting it, so eventually you've used up all your cards, and then you're going to roll again, and this time again, you're going to try working down across this. Now, what's interesting about this game is there are cards which have things on here, such as, I'll show you an example. We're going to see cards on here, which means that if you happen to have a card that says, I know, if you control the fewest regions, add a cube onto here. And what happened in the last game, actually, is somebody is, so if you happen to have the fewest cards, so actually, let's say I'm not controlling these 2, or not even controlling these 2, I can add 1 cube from my reserve. So I've got to have my reserve, I've got to have got them across here first. I can add 1 in each, so I can do this, which is very strong because I've managed to chuck out 3 things for 1 turn, whereas they might have had to chuck it out over numerous actions. Now, what's of interest is you don't know every card that's going to be in the game because some of them aren't going to be in play, and the way that's of interest is the fact that I don't know if my opponent deliberately lowered themselves or asked me to maybe I've got to say, oh yeah, remove a cube from the board, and naturally it makes sense to remove one of their cubes. If I remove one of my cubes and they're controlling it, and suddenly they say, well, actually now, you know, you've removed a cube, which means you're controlling the region, and now I do not have any controlled regions or a fewer regions than my opponent, then I'm benefiting massively. So I thought maybe they've got this card, maybe they don't. But based on what I can see on the board, I want to just play it so that I'm just helping myself. It turned out that was the wrong thing to do because I did have that card. Now this deck kind of gets thinner because when you have had a battle from these cards, that card has gone to the victor, whoever happens to win it. So they won the Battle of Ludford Bridge. Then you're going to shuffle up all these cards. We're going to move to round 2 and move on. And again, the person with the lowest battle is going to go first. And obviously, as these cards, you know, that one goes out in round 2, that goes out in round 3, round 4, round 5, all the cards are pretty much getting played with all but one. Now, it doesn't take too long to play necessarily, but you're thinking about where you want to play it, because on a certain round, if you're round 3, then the opponent, regardless of which faction they're with, they're able to benefit potentially. Sometimes they don't want to bother, but it's something they could do, and generally it's always a good thing for the opponent. So you don't want to be trying to play certain cards instead of rounds. You kind of want to hold it back, maybe play it for the action points instead. And there are other things you can be doing with your action points. What you can be choosing to do is saying, okay, well, you've got 3 things here. I'm going to try and remove one of them. I need to roll lower than that, so I need to roll a 2, and my dice rolling is rather good today compared to earlier. And in this instance, you get to remove a cube, and that's it. You're spending one of these, and if it's got 3 action points, you basically have 3 attempts. It's 3 re-rolls, basically. That's all it's going to be. There are other things you can be doing. You can be moving things around. You can try and get your own cube onto there as well. All you need to be doing there is just equaling your rolls. So the more you have on there, obviously, it's hurting your chance of getting more on there, which helps balance the game. As for a review, I think it's a good game. I think it's an interesting concept. I like the idea, as I've talked about already, about how the cards work. There is luck though. I mean, the Perudo, I love Perudo, it's one of my favourite games. And I don't think it works too well in this environment because it is just a one-off, how am I doing? Yes, you're holding back a card, which does give you mitigation, which makes sense. But unfortunately, when you're just rolling to get something on there and doing really bad rolls, I lost the game, I think. It was very close. It got down to here. There's only 2 against 1 in it. But I felt the dice rolling was a factor in... I know I did a lot worse at dice rolling. Just to say, oh, let's try and get a thing off there. And then, oh, I can't get it off there. The fact that you can't mitigate it with cards, I think, is an issue. It's a worry for me. And it's a shame because the current BGG rating is 7.1. My rating, as it says, is 6. And I'm a harsh rater. My average rating is a 6.31 or so. But still, I think, you know, I love the artwork. This is going into, obviously, I've got a gallery already for Clemens France, so it is going to go into that playlist as well. I just wish there was something more to it that helped balance that as well. That's the only factor I can think about. Aside from that, there are some issues with the rules because it's not very clear. You can go on the forums and they'll tell you more about this, but it isn't clear in here. And there's something else whereby it just, 2 of these cards make this a bit clearer as well. Yes, the idea of Perudo makes sense, and there is definitely a nice snappiness to it. I like that kind of enjoyment to it, but it isn't, unfortunately, something that, you know, has really stood out for me as, you know, a nice 2-player game of this ilk. And there are quite a few which, you know, have this kind of wargamey feel, which are very nice. So, interesting concept. Nothing against the designers. I know they're going to be active, and I'm sure will give their views as they are quite vocal on BGG, for example. But that's been the Cousins War, a nice small little game, which, if you don't take it too seriously, is something you might want to check out. Back to the table.